Master of Social Work Student Organization President. And so we have been working hard, a group of us have been working diligently these last 4 to 5 months trying to put together this event, and that's why I'm so happy that you are here. First, I would like to introduce Mark Brem. He is our former previous president, and he is the brain genius behind this event. And so I wondered if he wouldn't mind sharing a few words about what this event means to him. And yeah.
Hello everybody. So when we first started developing this event, I never dreamed it would get this big. So before I start, I just want to thank everyone who was involved in making this event grow. When we first started planning and thinking about this idea for this event, what I was seeing around the country is some of the top social work programs had these symposiums where they would present their students' research and their contribution to the profession. Two things that are, I think, marketable about this event is you get to create a professional research poster. That's a marketable skill that you can put on your resume. You can say, I've presented research at a conference. And the second part to that is it also adds value to your degree, all right? You know, some of these programs around the country, the top ones are producing evidence-based work that is continuing into the profession, which is, it's a really neat thing to see, and just new ideas, I think, are what grow our profession. So when we first started this, the first symposium we had, what, 10, 12 people, is that right? 16? I think that's kind of stretching it, but it was a very small number, and to me, at the end of it, I kind of felt defeated because I wanted something like this. But to see something like this happen today, it's like I'm speechless. So what me and Dr. Bertram did to kind of prepare for this, which I didn't think was going to happen, but it did, is we kind of wrote a manual after the first year about how to do this, what needed to happen for this to be such a successful event. And Liz did it. And I just want to thank you, Liz. I think this is great what you've done, and we're able to have sponsors, Cornerstones of Care. Just want to thank you guys for helping out with this event, because it's huge. And I think it'll continue to grow our partnership with Cornerstones, and I think we're excited about that. So I guess that's all I have to say, but thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for all your hard work to make this event a success, and I look forward to checking out all your research.
To add just a bit to what Mark said, part of being a social worker is being passionate about advocating for our communities. And more than anything, for me, personally, this is an opportunity for us to connect with other people in the community, to show them the great work that you've been doing all semester, all throughout your program, and to say, this is what we're doing, now let's make it happen. Let's share ideas, because at the heart of this, we want to help people. And part of helping people is coming together at a platform like this and sharing those ideas. Mark was very generous in offering me some thanks for organizing this, but you know, I could not have done it alone, and so I want to take a minute to acknowledge those people, and I have it written down so I don't forget. You get nervous when you get up here. But so, first, I want to acknowledge Lindsay Jacobus. She has been our treasurer, but she has done so much more than that. So she is in the back corner over there. Next, I would like to acknowledge Rebecca Taylor, and she is sitting here. She helped with the food for to thank Dr. Prue, sitting there behind the camera. He has been so supportive to us throughout this. He couldn't make it to all the meetings, but he was there approving money requests and those things, and we couldn't do that without him, and we appreciate that. I also want to thank John Efforts. Where are you? You will have to...
He left.
Oh, he left. Okay, well, he did the brochure for this event, or he did the cover of this event, and we are very thankful for that. I also want to thank Leslie Carter-Mills. If she is over, I think she's in the corner over there. She sat at our registration table. Thank you, Leslie. I want to mention Corporate Copy Print because they have been lovely to work with in putting together our pamphlets. Yes, and we have had numerous students who are willing to go stop by Corporate Copy Print to pick up posters, those kinds of things. So thank you to those of you whose names aren't mentioned, but I remember who you are and I'm thankful for you. I also want to take a quick moment to thank my husband and my family because it takes a lot of time to do an event like this, and I pushed myself much further than I thought I could, and I couldn't have done it without their support, so thank you. Next, I want to thank Dr. Bertram because she has been at our meetings, she has been helping to guide us and give us some of the answers. Yes. This is a big event, it is hard. There were a lot of obstacles that we could not foresee. There were a lot of obstacles that happened the day before an event that you can't anticipate, and you just roll with the punches and you go with it. And we are thankful that you have been rolling with the punches with us as well, because I know that there has been a learning curve for us, and you guys have been very compassionate as we are trying to figure out how do we do an event like this, how do we make it successful, and I can't say enough about appreciating my fellow students here at UMKC. So thank you. Finally, I want to thank a couple of our sponsors, Cornerstones of Care. Yes, thank you. We are so grateful for their support for this event. Everything counts, and they have been very helpful. And then also Connections to Success, which is over here to my right. Yes. All right, and I will go ahead and I am going to pass the mic on to Dr. Bertram, who has been so helpful in this event.
Thanks, everybody. It is a great deal of hard work, and the students put a tremendous amount into this, but it's not just the students in the student organization. Each and every one of our students spent a semester, at least a semester. Some began their work on these projects in our program implementation and evaluation class, coming up with the data that they needed, going into the literature, to compare and contrast what was happening at their field sites with what good implementation should be like, trying to think through what is the practice model and how can we better define it and better support it. And a number of these projects were quite literally almost a year in the making. This was hard work by each and every one of you students, and hats off to you, really. You should give yourselves a round of applause. Also, the students had to have support and guidance from faculty, and I would like to acknowledge the faculty who led them. They are listed by each student's name in the program, but I would like to call them out a bit. Dr. Elaine Spencer-Carver, I see Nancy Tolman, another instructor, hiding over there between grade 4 and 5 and 8. Who's? And where's Barbara? Is Barbara here? Barbara Har?
Nope.
Well, Barbara Har was also one of the instructors, and we want to acknowledge her. Before we get to our keynote, I want to spend a few moments talking about the National Child Welfare Workforce Initiative grant that we secured in March. We are one of, it's a university partnership grant. We are one of 11 social work programs that were fortunate enough to be selected for this 5-year, approximately $750,000 grant. We consciously joined in developing this grant with the Children's Division, Tim Decker, which I'll be introducing in a moment, with Cornerstones of Care, Denise Cross, who I'll also be introducing in a moment, and Ryan Dowis, who's our point person during the course of the 5 years, also a great former student. And is Lisa from CPC here? There you are, Lisa Mazel from Child Protection Center. Cornerstones of Care and the Child Protection Center are two private child welfare agencies that are partnering with us and the Children's Division in this, frankly, child welfare change initiative by developing our premises that if we can recruit and learn how to recruit, what qualities to look for in potential child welfare workforce, and then develop them with good course content in evidence-based practices and implementation science, as well as a unique concept of field rotations, which I'll say a little bit more in a minute, that we will develop a better, more well-rounded, evidence-informed, implementation-informed future child welfare workforce. The grant prepares up to 24 trainees over the course of 5 years, but the impact is not just 24 new people entering the child welfare system in private or public in Kansas City. We have many feedback loops that is going to inform us about how to improve our curriculum, as well as how to improve implementation in the field sites, as well as how to improve how all of the child welfare system, public and private, fits together. And we've built in several checkpoints along the way where we will be meeting and learning from the data that's generated from the trainees' experiences. The field rotation concept is Tim Decker's. It was brilliant. He said, why don't we do something like medical school does or nursing school does? Instead of having a student at one site for an entire year where they only see a portion of what goes into doing good child welfare work, let's give them the panoply of possible experiences. So our trainees are going to be rotating through things like investigations, foster care parent recruitment and support, intensive in-home services, family support teams using team decision-making as we bring in evidence-based practice into that process. They're going to be exposed to supervision and coaching, to design and delivery of training, to administration, public and private, in child welfare. The goal here is to produce a very firm foundation from which these trainees, as they graduate, not only contribute to changing child welfare practices in Kansas City, but also throughout the state. Let Tim talk more about the change initiatives across the state. Missouri is the only state, frankly, that has ever received 2 of these incredible grants at the same time. The Bachelor's Social Work program in Springfield at Missouri State also received one of these grants. So we are going to have an opportunity with the support that comes from, and you can see the website up there on the screen, the support that comes in technical assistance and training around specific change initiatives that we're identifying to really make a significant impact in changing the nature of child welfare practice and, frankly, the experience of working within child welfare. This is a 5-year change initiative, but I'm quite certain that the changes will continue beyond that point. Anybody who would like to know more about that, we have brochures at the front of the registration table. We still have a few trainees ships to award. And before I turn this over to Denise to say a few words, I'd like to introduce the first two, if they're both here, trainees that were selected for next year. Sonia Alexander. Sonia's remarkable. We specifically wrote the grant because we wanted to find non-traditional, we didn't want to just recruit out of child welfare practice. We wanted to find people who hadn't been working in child welfare. And Sonia fits that to a T. Do you mind if I share? Sonia was a dancer in New York before going in and doing bachelor's studies in child and family studies and psychology. So she's just, I can't wait to see how you're going to blossom. I just think you're going to do grand. Is Christine Ostermeyer here? Way in back, holding her baby. We were also looking specifically for people who had experience raising their own families or responsibility within their family of origin for raising kids. And in that manner, and many, many more, Christine fit the bill. We have a couple of others that I haven't quite, because of the hectic nature of this week, gotten to make the award to, but we have at least 2 or 3 others that we're going to make an award to. There are still a couple of traineeships available. If someone is interested, we will take applications. So that's my pitch. I can't wait to see what happens 5 years from now, what it's going to look like. And every year along the way, this event is going to be a recruitment and dissemination point for what we're learning, as well as our annual fall conference that we put on with Cornerstones of Care and Midwest Foster Care and Adoptions in the Children's Division, fostering strategies for change, children, families, and their communities. So with that, I'd like to introduce Denise Cross, who'd like to say a few words. There you are.
Good afternoon. I'm Denise Cross. I'm the President and CEO of Cornerstones of Care, and this is amazing. It's just unbelievable. And thank you, UMKC School of Social Work, for organizing this event and highlighting and really showcasing the amazing work that you all have done. I'm so excited as I was reading through the synopsis of your research. I was like, ooh, we could use this in our organization. We need to follow up with you. So thank you for everything that you've done. And it's really great to see our future leaders all together in one place and highlighting the work that you've done so far. I'd like to recognize 3 graduating students who are especially close to us at Cornerstones of Care. And those would be Kim Osborne, who was a practicum student with us this year in our quality assurance team, and then Jennifer Bruns and Sarah Bell, who are part of our home visitation team. So thank you guys and congratulations. We at Cornerstones of Care are actually very fortunate to have a number of social work graduates working across our family of agencies. And I had a list, but then more folks started coming in, and so now I'm afraid I'm going to miss someone. So if you are an employee of Cornerstones of Care and graduated from the UMKC School of Social Work, would you stand up? Come on, I see you over there. Mark. See you still? And Mark is also one of our employees and part of our family of agencies, as well as Ryan Dallas, Emily Snow, and others, who I am so proud to have as part of our leadership team throughout our organization. This is a great partnership. We benefit a great deal from it, and we're very happy to support it. And not only this initiative, but the other partnerships and the Workforce Institute and initiative that Dr. Bertram just described is something that we're very, very invested in, and we're thrilled to ask to be a part of that initiative, and can't wait to see the great outcomes that I think will come from that. So I want to just thank Dr. Bertram and the other faculty, the Children's Division, and our other partners for really working with us to strengthen our sector and also to strengthen our community. We couldn't do it without you, so thank you.
And now it's my distinct honor to be able to introduce the new director of Missouri Children's Division. Tim Decker brings years of experience in helping to transform juvenile justice services in Missouri Youth Services at a level that brought national attention. People would come to Missouri in order to see the various ways that he found in order to change the culture of those services from punitive to reparative and, frankly, transformative would be my language, particularly for the youth themselves. There are some remarkable opportunities that have been made available to youth going through that system that would not be available to them now in terms of education and future workforce experience that Tim's vision, along with his staff, he would never say that it was just him, I'm sure. Tim and his staff in transforming youth services had a tremendous effect on those youth and their families. I believe that we're in the very early stages, the very beginning of the similar transformation of Missouri Children's Division. I eagerly look forward to the many different ways that we'll be working together with Tim and with the Children's Division. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce him, Tim Decker.
Hey, it's great to be here. I had actually spent about 25 years of my career in Kansas City, and I've actually been in this very room for many gatherings. It's actually been upgraded since I was last here, which is nice. But this is also one of the greatest events I've ever attended in this building. So I'm really glad to be here today. I think the only thing, Rosalind, that I missed when we were doing the grant and we were writing letters and making commitments is I should have asked to have a copy of all the projects every year. And to not only get the posters, but get the actual papers and so forth behind the projects, because as I was reading these over, as I was traveling here today, and as I was walking the room after I got here today, I thought the same thing Denise did. What a tremendous amount of work, and how thoughtful and insightful and connected to the research and connected to some of the very things that we're envisioning for the future of the Children's Division and our various partners. I thought this is really an event that I wish all of my staff could attend. Because I think it would, we have lots of great people and some of my staff are here. So it's a great event to spark your ideas and to get people envisioning something else that might be possible. If you are with the Children's Division, since I mentioned that, currently, would you stand up? I thought about starting today by trying to tell you that I was 34 years old. Is there anybody in the room that would believe that? Okay. So he's running the camera and he knows I'll tell him to shut it off if he doesn't. You know, that wouldn't be true, because I was actually born in 1960. But this is my 34th anniversary as a social worker. I graduated on May 9th, 1982 from Park University with my BSW. And I was working at that time at Synergy House, which some of you are familiar with, which at that time was just a runaway and homeless youth shelter on the hill. And I remembered that day just because it was very significant in my life, but I had to check it kind of on my phone to see if, you go back and check and see, was that really a Sunday, to make sure I had the date right. And on the, what happened on that day, I didn't notice anything about me graduating. But I did notice it was my graduation date, and I confirmed that. But I think that's so true for us as social workers. Our work is one of humility, and it's one of doing good works. It's one of doing the right thing on a day-to-day basis, but it certainly is underappreciated. And it certainly is something that you're never going to necessarily draw accolades for, but you're really doing the very important work that needs to be done to strengthen our families and strengthen our communities. So I appreciate you doing that. This brought back memories of why I went into social work in the first place as I was thinking about coming to this event today. I remember very distinctly, I grew up in St. Louis County and I traveled up to Kansas City to go to Park University because I was going to possibly go there on a track scholarship, but I also kind of had this thought I wanted to be a social worker. And I remember meeting with a woman named Edith Grant, who she was older at that time and had been in social work. I think probably had seen the evolution of many of the programs that were evolving, through the 50s and 60s and so forth. And I remember meeting with her, and I was this skinny kid that had a big afro because my hair is naturally curly, and in those days that's how we rolled, we wore our hair long. And I'm sure when she saw me, she thought, who is this suburban kid from St. Louis, and why does he want to go to social work, and why would he even want to do this? And she tested me. She said, well, you're going to be working with very difficult families who sometimes aren't going to want you involved with them. You're going to be administering programs that the public may or may not support. You're going to work incredible hours for low pay. You're going to have lots of opportunities to serve, but you're also going to have lots of opportunities where things are not successful. And she just went on and on and on and on about how difficult it was, and to the point where I thought she was trying to convince me not to become a social worker. Some kind of recruitment strategy, right? Yeah. Well, the thing for me is that I was actually getting more excited the more she was talking about it, and maybe that's what she was looking for, and maybe that's what she wasn't, but I could tell it was kind of, she didn't know what to do with that exactly. The reason I was getting more excited is probably the same reason that you're here in this room today. And that is because this work is a mission and it's a calling. Yeah. And I don't know if it's how you're wired, I don't know if it's how you're raised, but there's something that draws us to this work, and sometimes we don't even know why. As I've gotten older, after I got past, the 20s, where people, typically in their 20s, you're kind of mad at your parents for not doing this or not doing that, that's just the stage you kind of go through. But as I've gotten older and I've reflected on where that drive comes from, some of it probably is, wiring, birth order, we can have all kinds of theories about it. But some of it really is, honestly, from my mom and dad. My dad ran a grocery store in South St. Louis. We all worked in the store next to him. He taught us tremendous work ethic, that it didn't necessarily matter what you got paid. In fact, he paid me 50 cents an hour at the time, just to be on record. But it wasn't, you say, well, that was back then, that'll buy a lot. No, it wasn't that much, actually. The minimum wage was $2.45 or $2.65 or something. So he taught me work ethic, but the other thing my dad taught me is he taught me to be kind and helpful to people. My dad was the kind of guy, we had lots of elderly people that came in our store. I think a lot of people were probably living off Social Security. And he could find a way to help someone find a few bruised peaches that he could sell for half price so she could make a peach pie for her family. And that was just my dad, just random acts of kindness all the time. He went out of his way to help people. If somebody was stopped on the side of the road, we stopped to help. It didn't matter the circumstance. That was just my dad. That was just how he was. So I learned my kindness from him. Now my mom was, where my dad was a man of few words and many deeds, my mom was a person of many words and actually many deeds. That's where I got my gift of gab from. But my mom was she made her job raising 7 kids. But she also was very involved in school, she was very involved in church, she was very involved in the neighborhood. And my mom could organize a community around any kind of project that needed organizing. I learned how to relate to people from her, and I learned how to organize people, and I really learned how to be a leader, whether that be formal or informal, because my mom could get things done. She could get anything done that she wanted to do. To this day, she's the chair of a daycare board for our church. It has been for years. So now, instead of talking about organizing Girl Scout cookie sales, we're talking about subsidy rates for childcare, and we're talking about all those kinds of things. Because my mom knows about all that stuff because she's done that. But it's all been volunteer. I don't know where your drive came from, but I would guess there's people involved in that, whether it be parents or mentors or grandparents or friends. But this, when you're graduating, when you're moving forward in your career, it's a good time to kind of thank those who kind of brought you to where you are today. Now, there's some things that I've learned over time about this work, beyond the fact that it just has to be a mission and calling. And one of those is that our perspective really matters, right? So there's an old, and we used to tell this in juvenile justice all the time, because in juvenile justice, one of the problems is that we tend to blame the kids, right? We see them as delinquents. They're trying to get away with stuff. So it's really easy to go around thinking the kids are trying to get away with stuff, that we need to contain them, that we need to, surveil their behavior, that we need to, in some cases, incarcerate them. And what we would say to people is that if you want to change your outcomes, if you want to do better by the young people and families you're serving, sometimes you have to start from a different place. You can't get to where you need to be from where you are. Now, what do I mean by where you are? If you are looking at young people the way I just described, you're never going to bring out the best in them. Right?
Yeah.
Can I get an amen on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're never going to get that. So you have to start from a different place, and that different place is actually you.
Right.
It's how you view the young people and families that you serve. And in DYS, one of the ways we built this really effective system is that we were very prescriptive, not about every action. We certainly had a practice framework that was very powerful, but we were very prescriptive about our values and our principles. Now, values are kind of what you believe, and principles are beliefs in action, right? That's the difference between those two things. So we were very clear about how we're going to see the young people and families that we serve. And one of ours was that we believe that all people want to do well and succeed. We didn't think the kids got up in the morning, well, some kids probably try to get away with stuff, but we didn't think they wanted to steal cars, or we didn't think they wanted to be unsuccessful in life. We believed they wanted to do well and succeed, and we had to figure out how to help them kind of see that in themselves. I remember very distinctly a young man that I worked with when I was working here in Kansas City at one of our centers, and I saw incredible potential. This young man was from Kansas City. He had been involved in some fairly serious crimes. His kind of most frequent was auto tampering, but he had been involved in some other gang activity and so forth as well. But he was a very bright young man, and he had a lot of passion. And I remember saying to him one day, I'm not going to use his name just because he still lives here in Kansas City, so I want to keep that anonymity. I remember saying to him one day, you know what, you could do anything you want. You could go to college. You can pursue whatever career you want. You are so gifted. And I meant it because I knew him well, and we had a good relationship. And as I'm talking to him about this young man is crying. Now, why is he crying? Because I was challenging his belief system about himself. Now, what he said to me was, Tim, stop talking to me about going to college. I'm going to be dead or in prison by the time I'm 19. And he believed that. So when I was talking to him, and it was a learning thing for me, because what I learned was I got to walk in his shoes. I got to figure out why he sees the world that way. Of course, I can't stop seeing him differently, but I got to help him get to how I saw him and how others saw him. When you unpack it a little bit, his sister was in care as well. His mother had been the victim of a homicide. His father struggled with alcohol and was in and out of legal trouble from time to time. They certainly struggled with significant economic struggles. Many of the people he knew had met that fate. So that was where he was starting from. So we had to kind of meet him where he was, but we also had to help him see himself differently. One of the things, there's kind of an old phrase that we learned to operate on, and that is that you ought to treat people as if they already are what they could potentially become, and then do everything in your power to support them getting there. Treat people as if they already are what they could potentially become, and then do everything you can to support them getting there. In juvenile justice, we blame the kids. In child welfare, we blame the parents, right? I mean, if we're going to think about anybody who needs to be controlled, where we need to have compliance from, or where we see a lack of motivation from, it often is focused on the parents. This is not about not being responsible. It's about trying to figure out what that gap is. Because I believe people do the best they can with their available resources. Sometimes that resource is self-discipline. Sometimes that resource is experience. Sometimes that resource is is needing treatment for an underlying mental illness or substance abuse issue. Sometimes that resource, that lack of resources is confidence or belief or seeing it being possible or hope. This was hope. He didn't have hope. And without hope, it's hard to move forward in your life. So we really have to look at how we see the folks we work with and how we treat them. Now, this can be very powerful, and Rosalind, thank you for the wonderful introduction, but I think having that perspective in DYS really helped us transform the system, and we had 12 or so other beliefs too, which were really profound. But in juvenile justice, just to believe the kids want to do well and succeed is profound, and it's very different from what you'll see in almost any other jurisdiction in terms of what the core belief is. I'm not talking about the espoused belief, because everybody's got good stuff on their websites, right? It's what you believe in here that drives the decisions you make. So there's a lot of that blame that I'm talking about. Well, in 2008, DYS was able to win the Innovations in American Government Award, and that was the first time any Missouri program had won it in over 20 years. And part of the way we won that award was actually in this very difficult competition that starts with 1,000 applicants, gets whittled down to a couple hundred, gets whittled down eventually to 15, and you go to Harvard and present in the forum, which is where they've had these international debates and so forth. Part of the way we won was not only our good works and outcomes, but also the centerpiece of what we presented was our young people and families. So a young man from here in Kansas City, and I can't share his name, Terrence, was, along with me, was the co-presenter at Harvard, and was the only person who presented without notes. And we were going up against the National Defense Agency, and the director of that agency was there. Sean Donovan, who at that time was over New York housing programs and is now in the Obama administration, was one of the presenters. These are the people we were kind of going up against to win this award. And we won it, but it was a 16-year-old kid from Kansas City. Our young people and our families are capable of a lot more than you think. Now, in DYS, we didn't stop there. So when Rosalind talks about educational achievement, we basically were constantly looking at ourselves. Our mantra at DYS was to be proud, because you always have to kind of celebrate what you have accomplished. To be hopeful, which generally when you're hopeful, it means that you have some sort of plan, right? You're hopeful because you know a way moving forward. So you always have a plan for getting better, but also to be chronically dissatisfied. So proud, hopeful, chronically dissatisfied is an attitude that leads to really good programs and leads to really good opportunities for young people and families and leads to really good outcomes. We looked at our educational achievement in the agency, and at that time we had about 24.5% of our young people who were leaving the agency with a high school diploma or GED. At that time, that was twice the national average. That's a great headline, right? But what we said in our system is we said, and you should do this with any outcome you're seeking, know where you are. Just like in children's, we need to know where we are, whether it's around permanency or well-being or safety, and then ask yourself this question: is it good enough? Is it good enough for your own kids? Is it good enough for your own family? Is it going to work? Knowing how important it is, knowing a lot of our kids couldn't get back in school, and knowing how important that those opportunities are, knowing that their chances of later success and actually avoiding what the industry calls recidivism. We always called it law-abiding behavior because we wanted to measure the positive. We didn't want to just try to prevent the negative. In terms of increasing law-abiding behavior, that was essential. So we said, it's not good enough. We're embarrassed to say that a fourth of our kids are leaving with that essential credential to their future. So we said, well, what if we just, what would be not embarrassing? What would be something we wouldn't necessarily be proud of, but we could live with in terms of the baseline of a good outcome? And we said it's got to be at least 50%. People are like, that's crazy. That's 100% improvement. But you know what? This year, that agency is over 50%. As of last year, they'd improved 88% in terms of their achievement rates. This was, at that time, what, if you've read Good to Great, what Jim Collins calls a BHAG. Anybody know what a BHAG is? It sounds better if you got a little bit of an accent. BHAG. A big, hairy, audacious goal. It's not my term, it's Jim's. So, but it was our BHAG. And now they're at their BHAG, so we got to set another one. But it really comes from bringing kind of philosophy and values into action and into practice. the governor asked me how we did it, and I said, you know, Governor, it was, honestly, I can tell you 7 or 8 strategies that we implemented, but more than anything else, it was everybody in the agency making it important. It was everybody believing we needed to do it, no matter what it took. And then people then began to find the strategies and the interventions that needed to be made to get us there. And we started a virtual school, and we did all kinds of interesting kind of things with supporting our young people's learning. But it was only because we had that belief and we had that goal. We need to think about what those goals need to be in child welfare as well. It also takes an individualized response. The reality is that what we should be doing is we should be making our programs fit the families and not the other way around. Right? Now in practice, we often have a kind of a checklist, right? We have certain things that we tend to, and I'm not saying we like everybody, like there's no exceptions, but our system tends to set up lots of common, where you start to look at plans for families and they start to look a lot alike. That bothers me. Because the reason, just like we get back to the young man I talked about, the reason that someone is not moving forward is going to be different for different people. And we have to come alongside them enough to know what that is to develop a plan that's actually going to work for all of us. We have to individualize. We also have to be holistic in our response. So when we remove a child from a home, we can't afford not to think about what that does to their social connections, what that does to their opportunities to participate in youth development activities, what that does to their sense of stability in their life. And I don't mean stability just in where they live. I mean knowing that your life is going to be somewhat predictable. I mean, you guys know, I hopefully, this may be an overstatement, we kind of know where we're going to lay our head tonight. We kind of hopefully know the people that are going to be there. We kind of know I'm already thinking ahead to what I need to do this weekend, and I think I can make that happen. You're doing the same thing. Our kids in the foster care system don't know that. They often don't know who's going to be around tomorrow, or where they're going to be, or whether they can sign up for something and count on the fact that they can participate in it. So we've got to think much more holistically about them and about their parents. And not that we can prevent all of that, but we've got to plan for all that. It's got to become important to us. We can't feel like we did our job if we got them into a safe placement. Because that intervention is probably creating a whole set of other cascading problems for them that we have to account for, right? So we have to look at families holistically. We know that what it takes to get good child welfare outcomes, which is going to be the kind of the platform of our agency, is a well-prepared, a well-supported, and an effective workforce. We know that it's going to take outstanding leadership and management. And we know that it's going to take robust partnerships. Because in child welfare, we're an interdependent system. It takes an immense amount of collaboration to get good outcomes. And when we look at places that are doing a good job of, for instance, bringing the number of children in care down, which actually the most profound and immediate threat facing our agency right now and our ability to do really effective work is the growth of the number of kids in care. We're up 10 to 12% over the last couple of years. That should be something we should all be looking at. But in places where they're actually addressing that and bringing numbers down, you see effective practice, you see deliberate practice, and you see collaboration amongst GLLs, GALs, amongst support, coming alongside parents and young people, working with judges. You see people really coming together around common outcomes. That's what we've got to do across the system. It's not just about bringing the number of kids in care down. That's not an outcome in itself. That's just something that you've got to plan for. But ensuring that children that they're safe, that they have permanent loving families, and that they have the same well-being that we want for our own children in their lives, the opportunity to be prosperous and to do what they want to do with their lives, we have to do that if we're going to get that outcome. Now, one of the things I'm really proud about is that our governor and our House and Senate this year believe that too. And are making some of the most important, I call them laser focused because I think they are, strategic investments in child welfare that have been made in years to address the caseload growth. They're investing an additional $5.3 million in contracting 400 to 450 additional cases, which will even further solidify our public-private partnership, which the system in Missouri is based on. There's additional money for children's services workers, about $1 million for 23 additional children's service workers, which is going to help us manage caseloads more effectively. Primarily, those are going to go into investigations. We've had very significant growth in hotline calls and investigations. But they've also made a $5.1 million investment in our workforce. Governor recommended $6 million. We're very grateful to get an investment of $5.1 million and to have had the deliberate discussions that occurred along the way to figure out what the very best strategies were for the state's investment. One of those is something that we call mobility. What that means is it means workers in the field with tablet technology that directly connects to what we call FACES, our electronic data system, our federal SACTA system is what it would be called at a broader level, that allows them to actually do work from the field because our staff are in the field most of the time. And that's not just checking emails and stuff, that's doing safety assessments on their tablet, that's developing treatment plans, that's a lot of the work. These are an app for kind of each thing in terms of what they do in their jobs. I can tell you from walking in the shoes of workers, which was one of the most important things to me. I've been in 9 different places in the state where I spent a day with a worker. And I've been in places like, started in Springfield, I've been in, down in Mountain Grove, I've been in, here in Kansas City, a couple different places, St. Louis City and County, Macon, Missouri, been down all the way in the Boot Heel, down in Penobscot County. And I can tell you this is a common issue with workers being in the field. When I was in Greene County, I was shadowing an investigator, and we were thinking we were going to go get some lunch, you know, because we had wrapped up some morning stuff, and she gets on her phone a text that says, you've got a 3-hour safety assessment that's got to be completed. And we're kind of in the downtown area. We actually had to kind of turn around, find parking 2 or 3 blocks away from the office, go up elevators to the 7th floor, and it took us about a half hour to actually get the paperwork in our hands so we could proceed with that 3-hour safety assessment. And we completed it with like 10 minutes to spare, which isn't about the time as much as it's about making sure the children are safe. I was actually thinking I wasn't going to meet one of my performance measures actually, because the director can't even find a family. So, but we did, but it was so hard to do it because we don't have, there's a reason police cars and so forth have laptops and why other industries have equipped their folks with mobile technology. We will have it. We've got some people that are field testing some of the apps now. And as we progress through this year, we're going to buy 1,500 tablets. All of our offices are going to have Wi-Fi. And folks are going to be out in the field working, using technology as one of their tools to make sure they have real-time information as they're doing their work and to make sure they can efficiently do their work from the field and use that time, sometimes if they're out there just waiting on a family, to do some of their other work. So we think that's huge. When I shared that with workers, the workers think that's huge as well. There's also a significant investment, about $347,000 in training that's focusing on team investigation, sharpening our investigative skills and our ability to work with multidisciplinary teams in those activities, and then also secondary trauma. Everybody's talking about secondary trauma, everybody's talking about vicarious trauma, whatever you want to call it. There's very few systems that are really deliberately doing anything about it. We will be deliberately doing something about it. We'll be equipping workers with supports, we'll be equipping workers with knowledge and experiences that are going to help them navigate what they deal with every day. From being out there, years ago, for years I've been reviewing critical incidents at the department just as a sister agency. But I thought, initially coming in that the trauma was like that child fatality or that single incident that might occur along the way. But what I've come to realize is that it really is the way the work chips away at you every day. The way it can be discouraging, the way it just kind of takes it out of you and it's hard to get re-energized. Not just because the work is hard, but there's a lot of discouragement, there's a lot of challenge. There's sometimes, we were working with one family when I was on the Work on Your Shoes where, most of the families I had ideas I could share with the worker about let's try this or whatever, On that family, I went away from that situation thinking, I don't know what I would do. And I know our workers go away sometimes thinking, I don't know what I would do. The manual doesn't cover this one. You know, and then, but they know the situation needs attention, so that just pulls at you, and it just tugs at you, it just makes it hard. We want to help people learn how to manage it. There's certain things about this work, and you guys know it, that you can't put in a child welfare manual, and you can't plan for. You guys, I see some smiles around the room. This is not that, I mean, a lot of it you plan for, and you have really good structures and frameworks in place, but you do a lot of thinking on your feet. One of the visits I was on, we were doing an investigation on the Fort Leonard Wood campus. And this was a mom that there was a separation that was occurring, and this was a mom that was reported she had locked her kids in an upstairs room or something along those lines. We got there to the home when she was in the process of packing to move out. Okay? And a couple of you may have heard me tell this story before. So there's boxes all over, there's tape. She's got 3 little kids. She's got this 4-year-old girl who's taken pride in being she's introduced herself, I'm the big sister. You know, and she's really feeling like some leadership in the family. And she had 2 little boys, a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. So the investigator, I'm there with the investigator. I'm not even supposed to be there except for that I'm walking her shoes. It would normally be a single investigator. And she's trying to interview mom about what happened. And these kids are just kind of running around, crawling around. And I look across the room, and one of the kids has a scissors in his hand, and he's doing this with the scissors. And I'm thinking, you know, I had this like non-intervention thing I was going to like just try to observe and maybe debrief later and stuff. And I'm thinking, I think on this one I need to break that rule. So I'm reaching across, and the worker's doing the real strength-based thing. You just see your kid has a scissors kind of thing. But it wasn't anything I would blame the mom for in the sense that she was packing, she was cutting the tape. Somehow the kid got into these scissors. And we had her distracted at the time. So I'm thinking, wow, I asked the worker, how do you deal with this when you're here by yourself? So I just usually kind of find a way. So this keeps going on, and there's lots of chaos in the room as she's trying to do her work. So I say eventually, I'll tell you what, why don't I, and we're there with an MP as well, because this was an investigation, so it was a co-investigation. So I said, well, the MP and I, why don't we, if you're okay with it, and we asked the mom, we'll watch the kids while you guys do your interview. And that way you can both really focus on them and get the information. And the worker's like, well, hey, I don't usually have that, but that would be great if you guys would do that. And they would go upstairs to look at the room and all of that. So we're down there, and I'm remembering everything that I know about early childhood and stuff, you know, how you work with kids. So I'm down on the floor doing mimicking and trying to engage them in play therapy and, you know, doing all that kind of stuff. And so I get the kids kind of occupied, and I'm thinking, okay, what should the MP do? Well, this one kid kept wanting to go up the steps to where mom was, right? So I tell this guy, I say, if you could just, and you know, this was, I think, one of his first investigations, I said, if you could just guard the steps and just make sure none of the kids, I'm thinking process stuff here, I'm thinking I'll be in and you watch the overall process and make sure everybody kind of stays where they need to be. So I said, if you could just stand by the steps and not let a kid go up. So if you can envision this guy, he's got a gun, you know, he's got the club, he's got the mace, he's got the uniform, and he's standing guarding those steps, right? Now, who wants to guess what the kid did? Went right between his legs and started going up the steps. And I'm like, grab that kid, come on, get him. You know, but that's the kind of stuff that goes on when you're in the field. You have to really think on your feet, and you've got to take everything that you've learned in your education and put it to use. But it is challenging. And it takes it out of you. So our investment in secondary trauma and in supporting our workers, I think it's going to be huge. Now, another thing I'm very excited about is the legislature, the governor and the legislature have invested $2.2 million in a career ladder for us. Previously in the Children's Division, if you were a Children's Service Worker 1, you after a year would become a 2, and then you're kind of stuck there, right? So, and our people would do good work, I think want to do good work either way, but there really wasn't any kind of pathway to say, I'll tell you what, if you're at that level and then you can do certain competencies or you want to take on certain added responsibilities and your performance is a certain level, let's move you up to a 3. And then let's move you up to a 4, and where it makes it possible for people who really want to do social work to stay in the field working with families. Right now, the only pathway to move up in our system is to become a supervisor. And there's some people that really want to be a supervisor. I'm a practitioner, but I also love being a leader. So, I love both roles, and my job kind of lets me do a little bit of that. But some people really just want to be a really good practitioner, but there's no way to move up. This builds that. And we can begin then to tie it into some of the competencies that we're talking about when we talk about the curriculum and we talk about aligning with best practice or evidence-informed practices. When we start talking about expanding things like motivational interviewing and team-based decision-making and family conferencing, these are folks that actually can be trained in those things and can be facilitators for those things because that can be part of their role as they move up. Very excited about this. It's important that we do it right. It's something we'll learn from implementing, but it's a wonderful opportunity to make it possible to keep some of our very, very best people on the front lines. Now, these are great investments. The other thing I want to share with you, though, is a little bit of a framework. Because one of the things we learned in DYS, and I've seen this in other high-performing systems, is it isn't just about having the right kind of financial investments. It isn't really just about implementing the right practices. It's also about, and Rosalind talked about this in her remarks a little bit, it's also about organizational culture. So the formula for success that I know I've learned over my leadership career is that you, one, have to be focused. So you got to figure out who it is we're trying to serve and what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So a lot of people do those through vision and mission statements and all that, or they have compelling goals. In DYS, our compelling goal was that all young people served by DYS would become a law-abiding citizen and lead a fulfilling life. And everything we did was around making that happen. So it's just a very compelling, and the fulfilling life is about, we also wanted our kids to go on and be happy. It wasn't just about, obeying the law. We knew that there was a connection between that well-being measure and then actually having a successful life that contributed to their communities rather than taking away from their communities. So you have to be focused. You also have to be very deliberate about the culture you're creating in your organization. And many of you will go on, are already in or go on to leadership roles in organizations. Part of that starts with that important work around values, how we get to see the families that we serve, the children that we serve, what are our principles that we're going to operate on, how are we going to work with each other. The real definition for culture, the really simple definition, is just how we do business around here. So I always tell people, if you were talking, I should ask some of my workers, if you were talking to somebody, a friend in California, and they said, what's it like to work for the Children's Division, what would you say to them? And you don't have to answer all that, but you could. Tell me later. That really is an eye into your culture. When people begin to jump in to talking about the mission and, oh, man, we protect children and we do that and oh, my team really supports me and, we never give up on families and this and that, then you know those are some of the indicators of a really strong culture in an organization. When you hear, we're completely overloaded, we don't feel like people understand what we're going through. I'm repeating things I've heard, actually. When people writing policy don't know what we're really doing day to day, when there's that feeling, that sense, and I could go on, that tells you need some work on your culture. And in Children's Vision, we need some work on our culture. It's stronger some places than others, but we need some work on our culture. Part of culture is also leadership. And one of the things that we're going to potentially have the opportunity for through the NICLE grant, the National Child Welfare Workforce Grant, is a major infusion of leadership, training, and development. And that just comes with being part of the grant. We're going to do that either way. We can do it quicker and more effectively, I think, in a partnership way with them and with our universities that we're working with. So you got to deal with the leadership. Then you have to have effective practices. You can use the term evidence-informed, evidence-based, research-based. Those all mean different things to different people. But you got to be very selective about what we're trying to do based on the culture we're created. Clearly in DYS, because we had a certain culture that was very youth development oriented, we would have never picked a strategy that involved using isolation or separation of kids. Because it didn't fit our values. It wasn't effective either, but it didn't fit our values. We would have never picked to lock kids up that didn't need to be, kind of thing. So that led us to think about least restrictive environments and humane practices and family voice and choice and all those things because of what we believe. So aligning with your values, you pick those practices. And then you do them well. You implement them in a quality way. And that's how you sustain long-term system change. That's how you sustain exemplary outcomes in the system. Focus, leadership and culture, practice, quality equals results. And that's what we're going to apply in the Children's Division. That's the systemic approach that we're going to apply. And there's lots of things we're doing. I saw a poster about team decision making. We want to grow team decision making in our organization. Thank you. I'm going to get your paper. So there's things like that. We're working on healthcare homes as a way to focus more on the kind of well-being framework. We have a judicial strategy that's implemented to really strengthen the court practice side of this. A trauma-informed care effort that is really kind of moving forward very systemically about how our agency will begin to examine everything we do kind of through a trauma lens. We're doing some incredible work with youth that's helping those young people that will be transitioning out of our system. I could go on and on about the different strategies. None of that works unless it's built on a really strong foundation of beliefs and principles, of leadership and practice frameworks and policy frameworks that we know are actually going to work, a prepared, supported, and effective workforce. And then I always think of this as building a house, and alongside you kind of got these pillars that hold it all together, which has to do with leadership development, professional development, quality improvement, and quality assurance, and all those other strategies that are kind of the process strategies that keep your organization focused. And then you can build all kinds of blocks in the middle that have to do with the things that you're actually trying to accomplish. One of the really, I think, gifts or opportunities through the National Child Welfare Workforce Grant is that these partnerships that we now have with the universities are going to be used to help really begin, the same way Rosalind was talking about looking at the university curriculum, we're going to be looking at and revamping our professional development curriculum in the agency so we can have alignment with best practice. And so that there can be a synchronicity between the two. When we talk about these rotations and so forth, as we grow that and people actually learn skills that are actually, I mean, how many of you have learned a skill in your program and then go back to your agency and found out you can't really use it because it's not what you're doing? How many? Come on, be honest. Anybody? Okay, I knew there was some. Because I've been through that before. You go in and you go, well, I learned all about this new approach, but unless I can get the power somehow to grow it in the agency, we're not going to be able to do it. So that's very frustrating. The more we can get alignment between what people are being trained to do and then what they're actually getting to do, and make sure that is aligned with this overall framework that we've been talking about, the more effective we're going to be. So we're committed to actually examining everything that we do. We're going to look at all of our training and professional development, and we're going to make sure it reflects not just teaching people policy, but also focusing on practice and on the kind of skills and competencies that are needed to be effective. So we're very, very committed to doing that. When we talk about the National Child Welfare Workforce Grant, and then just to give you my take on it, things I'm very excited about is I'm excited about thinking in a much more diverse way about our workforce and who we want to attract into it. I mean, I myself am a former kind of produce stocker at a grocery store, and I somehow wound up in this role. So there's lots of people who have an inclination to serve, and we want to begin to draw those people into the social work field and allow them the opportunity to have a powerful legacy of service in their life and know that they've helped children be safe and helped young people turn their lives around, help families be strong. So we want that. The thought about we have difficulty in engaging families often as we're investigating in our differential response, and the fact about, in terms of thinking about training folks in more of a trauma-informed response that is also based in motivational interviewing techniques, that is a way to help our workers begin to come alongside families. A lot of times families at that stage, we offer them services and they turn us down. Well, they don't necessarily, I mean, I understand that. I try to look at that through the family perspective. You know, we're there for an investigation. So how do you move from what feels like an investigation to them, even if we call it a family assessment, to partnering with that family around helping them achieve their goals? That takes a really skilled individual to do that. We have to do that, so we need really skilled individuals to do that. So I like that we're going to be looking at models and going to be working on models that are addressing that. While they're stronger in some places than others, we need to work on our family support team process. And we're talking about some models to really help achieve, in addition to team-based decision-making, to achieve some better balance of participation, to make sure that families are, that what we're moving forward on is what families are really committed to. That everybody's kind of on board and going the same direction, and that we're really listening and families are feeling comfortable being real with us so that we can figure out what's going to potentially make it work or make it not work. The kind of updating of our training, I think, is going to be huge. And the people that are going to come into our agency and do these rotations, we expect to bring an incredible amount of energy and an incredible amount of insight. And we're going to ask them to push us and to challenge us and to learn from us as they do that. So we're very, very excited about it. We want to grow this partnership because we know that it's actually the only way that we're actually going to get there. So what I'll leave you with, and I know I've talked a long time here, and I know it's also warm in here. It's not as warm there as it is up here. Higher up. At least in my geography, not necessarily in my role here today, but is that we have to be, this is the time to be very ambitious. And if I shared with you all the things that we're working on and had more time to do that, you would say, oh my gosh, how are you going to get it all done? I assure you it's all aligned along a certain framework and a certain set of principles that we're pursuing. But we have to be very audacious. That's the only way we're going to get there, is to set our goals beyond what even you would believe today that we could accomplish. Our families deserve it. It will set in place that attitude that I talked about earlier of being proud and hopeful, acknowledging our progress, knowing where we're going, but also being chronically dissatisfied. Because the reality is, and this is getting back to why we get into this work, is that we know that no matter what we do, it's never going to be good enough. Right? Everybody realizes that. But it doesn't mean we're not good enough.
Right.
Okay? We're in a process, and we have this opportunity to help facilitate. We're not going to be able to do it for anybody, but to help facilitate transformative change with families that will have an impact beyond what we can ever measure. But we'll always go away thinking we wish we could have done more. And we always have to ask ourselves, how can we do better? That we can't ever stop doing that. So thank you for being here today. I look forward to looking at additional posters throughout the afternoon. Anybody who wants to email me your submission, I guarantee you I will read it. My email is nobody's writing this down, tim.decker@dss.departmentsocialservices.mo.gov. You can also find it on the web, but send it to me. I guarantee I'll read it. I've already read a couple of them that were sent to me as part of the process. Because we're looking for ideas, especially ideas that will align with where we're going as an agency, and a lot of the stuff in this room actually does. So thank you very much.
Chronically dissatisfied I am with myself. I love that. That's a great way to run an organization. But I'd like to run my life a little bit better along those lines. I made a major faux pas, and I'm going to publicly acknowledge it. I had a moment of brain vapidness as I was introducing everybody involved in the grant. Tanya Keys. Tanya, would you stand, please? Tanya's playing a key role in the Kansas City area Jackson County Children's Division, and she's playing a key role already behind the scenes in helping us think through how we're going to be doing these rotations for our trainees. So I'm really looking forward to all the work we're going to do together. I'm so proud, so very, very proud of our students and all of the work that you've done. I mean, take a look around you. This is just amazing. Enjoy yourselves. There's still plenty of food, network, have some fun, read each other's posters, and have a good afternoon.